Favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Congress is scheduled to return after Labor Day, and it's gearing up for a new fight over funding. Some conservatives, led by Marjorie Taylor Greene, said they won't fund the government unless the impeachment of President Biden is on the table. The White House, meanwhile, is seeking a short-term funding deal. January 6 cases are still filling the nation's courthouses. In the latest case, a top Proud Boys leader was sentenced to jail for a near-record 17 years. Despite all of Biden's bailout plans, deadbeat students will have to begin paying back their student loans in a month, just like the rest of us do with our loans. And on a weekend where there are typically many gun shows around the nation, the president announced plans to crack down on resellers and impose fines up to $250,000. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Well, hi there, folks. Welcome to Stinchfield. Happy Friday to you. So the Biden administration is, well, hunkering down, battening down the hatches. They are going dark. Go figure, right? Because as the walls close in, as more evidence starts to unfold about Biden family corruption, the entire administration becomes opaque. You know, they said they would be all about transparency. Opaqueness is the way it's going now. Now there is word that the National Archives is asking for permission. Yes, permission from the Biden administration and Barack Obama to release these some 5,400 emails where Joe Biden uses that fake pseudonym. Well, a bunch of them, by the way. Robert Peters, J.R.B. Ware, Robin Ware, all of these emails that have ties to Hunter Biden, Secretary Blinken. What is he hiding? We want to know. And so now the deadline has come and gone for the National Archives to turn over these emails. And now the National Archives is saying, hey, do you mind? Can we release these? I don't think they should get a say in any of this. Here's Nancy Mace.
He's been forced to lie about his activities with his son, Hunter, and his son's businesses every time he's been asked about it. And all this could be cleared up if Hunter Biden and Joe Biden wanted to come to the Oversight Committee and testify before our committee under oath. But we have to get access to these emails. The president will not answer the questions. And when he does, he lies about it. We want to make sure that we have all the information. The DOJ has not done their job with an investigation. And it's our job to do their job for them at this point, because of the way things are going. And every time we turn over a stone, we look under the rug, we look under a rock, we find more evidence.
Of course you do. And the evidence is going to keep coming, but you better get the emails. So now is the time to get tough. So now is the time to actually do something about it. I was thinking this, and I did a little research. Congress has constantly refused to go after the FBI, the National Archives, to do all the things necessary to get this information they want from these agencies. How about Congress sue these agencies in federal court for the documents? Many people say, oh, the federal government can't sue itself. Well, of course it can. I found precedents for this. The Secretary of Agriculture has sued the Environmental Protection Agency. There's the Federal Labor Relations Authority is in constant suit over all kinds of labor practices with many federal agencies. There is precedent with the Secretary of the Interior, going back a ways, suing the Federal Power Commission. The list goes on and on and on. Why don't we bring the courts into this? Stop talking about it. Stop having all these big words. Let's actually do something about it. So Biden is clearly hiding the corruption, which is why we need those emails, because I think the corruption is going to be laid out in those emails. Byron Donalds talked about that.
So, he did not use his official government email, like I'm shocked. The reality is that Joe Biden has known all along what his son and his brother were doing because he's been in on it. And when you have emails with aliases, fake names, the purpose is to give yourself plausible deniability. That is what Joe Biden was trying to do. The National Archives needs to release those emails.
All right, so again, I say, sue the National Archives. It works for private entities that institute freedom of information requests. So why don't we do the same thing? Bring the National Archives in, force a judge to get them to release these emails that clearly contradict that the Bidens somehow, there was an absolute wall, as Breitbart points out, in between Joe Biden as vice president and Hunter Biden, who was running all these business deals for the Biden family. This is Hunter's team. One of the emails that one of those private entities got, Hunter's team requested the guest list. And it reads like this. Rosemont Seneca, that's the company that Hunter worked for. Rosemont Seneca employees obtained information about White House guest lists, seating assignments, and official events such as the 2013 Turkey State Luncheon, 2014 France State Dinner, and 2012 United Kingdom State Dinner. That from Breitbart. There's also an email that we found being widely reported on where Hunter Biden asks for a, quote, big favor. And this is more at Hunter Biden's company, Rosemont Seneca, wanting a tour of the White House. This group of 5 will do the Saturday tour at 2 if you can get them in. They are the ones who are trying for tomorrow. Big favor for Hunter. When would you be able to confirm? So now the question becomes, why do they need the guest list? What's up with the tours? Well, you need a guest list, especially Rosemont Seneca, which is running all kinds of investments. The guest list lets you know who you can cozy up next to, who you can schmooze, who's going to be there, who may be somebody you can approach for, well, another foreign business deal with, of course, Joe Biden and a wink and a nod sitting up at that head table. So all of this contradicts Joe Biden's claims that there was daylight between him and Hunter Biden for all of these business deals. Remember those claims? Let me just play them for you.
I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses. I've never discussed my business or their business, my sons or daughters, and I've never discussed them. I don't discuss business with my son. I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business deal.
So again, we just read emails that literally throw all of that out the window. We know there's emails from Ukrainian oligarchs as well, including one email that Secretary Blinken was on, now Secretary of State Blinken, during the Obama years. Hunter Biden CC'd about Joe Biden calling the president of Ukraine. So Secretary Blinken there, when I tell you it's time that Republicans play hardball, this guy's not being talked about. He was instrumental inside the Obama administration. He was close to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. We know there were emails flying back and forth between those guys. He may be the key to all of this. So why don't you issue a subpoena, James Comer, Jim Jordan, and haul Secretary Blinken in and make sure you hold him in contempt if he refuses. See, everybody's refusing to talk to the Republicans. Hold them in contempt. The subpoenas need to start flying more than ever before. And you need to have teeth behind them, just like the Democrats did for us. Now, as I mentioned, why don't we bring in front of Congress these foreign actors? We've got the Ukrainian who was speaking out, says has information. Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor, is going after Burisma in Ukraine. Bring him before Congress. Bring the Moscow mayor's wife before Congress if she'll agree. I think there's many of these people that would agree to come before Congress, whistleblowers all over the place. I know one who knows a lot about China. We talk about the new federal state of China on this program all the time. Miles Guo is sitting in a federal prison because the federal government right now is scared of the guy. Bring him in to testify before Congress. He knows everything about the CCP and the Hunter Biden business deals and everything that was going on there. Unless people don't want to know what is really happening. And if that's the case, then that's about as bad as it gets. And you know who else agrees with me on the Secretary Blinken thing? Senator Ron Johnson. Listen to this.
Because he wanted to be Secretary of State, he did agree to sit down for a transcribed interview in December of 2020, and he lied to us. We asked him point blank, did you communicate with Hunter Biden via text or email? And he said no. Well, now we have emails between Hunter Biden and Anthony Blinken, plus his wife. Her name is Evan Ryan. Didn't make that connection. She also worked in the State Department. She was basically acting as a conduit using her personal email between Hunter Biden and Anthony Blinken. In one case, trying to set up a phone call between Blue Star Strategies. This is the lobbying forum for Burisma and Anthony Blinken.
All right. So impeach the Attorney General. He runs the DOJ. And so impeach him. Go after Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI. But Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, I'm telling you, he's got some keys to this castle that he's hiding in his pocket. That I promise you. Joining me now, former Chief of Staff to the Acting Secretary of Defense under President Donald Trump. He's also the author of the upcoming book, Government Gangsters, available for pre-order now. Our buddy Kash Patel is back with us. Kash, it's great to see you again.
Hey, good evening, Grant. Great to be with you.
Kash, what do you think about Secretary Blinken? He rarely gets talked about in these conversations about the Biden corruption.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing him up, and let me bring him up in another context. Secretary Blinken was the one who orchestrated, with the former deputy director of the CIA, Morell, the 51 intelligence letter that led to the biggest election rigging scandal in modern U.S. history outside of Russiagate. What am I talking about? When three former CIA directors, a former NSA director, and former high-level DOD officials signed a letter after the New York Post broke the story that Hunter Biden's laptop contained direct links of information of fraud, bribery, and pay-for-play schemes with China, Ukraine, and elsewhere. The next 4 days later, this letter was outed. And now we find out that Secretary Blinken is the one that initiated the contact between the deputy director of the CIA, Morell, to get this letter out the door. How do we know that? Don't take my word for it. Morell came out just about a few months ago with letters and emails saying that Secretary Blinken was the one who initiated it. So his tradecraft in rigging presidential elections and lying to the American people goes way back, further than just these incidences that you're talking about. He has set his own precedent, and I agree with you. The Republicans need to subpoena him immediately, and when he doesn't oblige by the subpoena, take his salary.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing I didn't mention. Congress controls the purse strings here. Why don't we take the salary of Jack Smith? Why don't we take the salary of those inside the FBI, even an entire division of the FBI, if we have to, that is acting in a manner that is not fair to the community at large, meaning going after conservatives and President Trump? Why doesn't Congress act to pull the purse strings away from these government gangsters?
I wish I had the answer for that. I've been calling for it for a long time. Look, I'm not saying defund everything across the board, but you can take pockets of money at Congress. You can fence certain money, you can have budget line items, and you can have appropriations act accordingly until, guess what? Until the current Attorney General doesn't break the law and refuses to comply with the congressional subpoena like he just announced last week, that he said he's going to refuse to allow FBI agents who are subpoenaed by the Judiciary and Oversight Committees to testify at the United States Congress. Yes, the Attorney General just said he's going to break the law, and Republicans are going to do nothing about it. And they should be going in there and grounding FBI Director Chris Wray's private G5 jet that we pay for. They should go in there and ground Merrick Garland's special projects and all of his new fancy toys he has running around the DOJ. And they can do that. And for whatever reason, they don't do it. And I'm not sure why. I've asked the question, you've asked the question, I've talked to people on the Hill, and we have never gotten an answer that is sufficiently justifies their feeble conduct from Capitol Hill. They are the only power we have to have some constitutional oversight and to prevent another election from being rigged. And it's moving too slow, in my opinion.
What do you think about my idea of citing precedent from other agencies that have sued other agencies? If they're not going to get action, why can't Congress just go and sue the Federal Bureau of Investigations, sue the National Archives?
Yeah, they could sue them, and then they get a court order. It's not a bad idea at all. But then you'd have to get, again, Congress to go out and act and sue them and take them to court and do it. And if they're not willing to just take a few million taxpayer dollars here and there, I don't know that they're going to be willing to spend a few million taxpayer dollars. That's what it's going to cost to sue a federal agency or department. And another example is NARA just released heavily redacted emails that they've been sitting on for 10 years. Mind you, the same NARA that referred Donald Trump for prosecution to the DOJ, which started the DOJ classified documents case against him, sat on 10 years worth of Joe Biden's corrupt criminal activities, didn't refer him to anybody. And when asked to unredact all the emails they just provided, they said they did not want to violate the providence of a president seeking advice from his advisors. How rich is that, since Joe Biden is the one that destroyed executive privilege for Donald Trump and ordered the hit job from the DOJ and the baseless prosecution? These people all need to be brought to heel, and Congress is our only mechanism. The only thing government gangsters respond to is money, and we haven't taken away a dollar of it yet.
No, and in many respects, we could see this with just Republicans being weak. I don't understand why there's not more strength out there. And I say this because there's a lot of calls for this rogue prosecutor in Fulton County that charged President Trump on all of these bogus charges with this election deal. So there's charge to have her removed, Fani Willis. Governor Kemp was asked about this. Now, Governor Kemp has been a disappointment, I think, to President Trump, to conservatives everywhere. He's the governor of Georgia. He was asked about this. I'm going to play this clip. It is cut 13, and then I want your response. We're almost out of time, but it's worth playing.
Up to this point, I have not seen any evidence that D.A. Willis's actions or lack thereof warrant action by the prosecuting attorney oversight commission. A special session of the General Assembly to end run around this law is not feasible and may ultimately prove to be unconstitutional.
I can tell you, Cash, that all you have to do is read the indictment of President Trump and the others, and it's literally criminal. Whoever wrote it, it's so far out of bounds of the Constitution.
Yeah, and here's a crazy idea. Governor Kemp is no fan of the MAGA movement, of the America First movement, so he's not going to do anything for us. So we need to actually take these cases to court in due time and expose the evidence of our own corruption because they documented it. That's where we're going to get the win.
Yeah. Well, Cash, it's always great having you on the program. I appreciate you. I know you were out for a little while. We missed you, but it's great having you back.
Thanks so much. Have a great Labor Day weekend.
Absolutely. You too. All right. That is Kash Patel. Don't forget his book, Government Gangsters, coming out very soon. Go ahead and pre-order them. Can't wait to see it. All right, folks. Political prisoner John Strand was on this program. You remember him, the J6er, who was literally just doing his job that day. Well, we are now hearing that he is being punished for joining us on the phone from prison when he called us. They are now punishing him for that. Apparently, your First Amendment rights are lost when you go in there, for J6ers at least. We'll have more on that from Dr. Simone Gold, who is with us next. Welcome back, everybody. I have bad news. We now have another conviction and sentencing. A gentleman by the name of Joe Biggs, who was an Afghanistan and Iraq war vet, has now been sentenced to 17 years in prison. He is a member of the Proud Boys. There's controversy over that group, but I don't think he deserves 17 years. By what I can tell from his case, he shook a gate in front of the police, and then he went inside the Capitol and walked around for 20 minutes. Now he's part of the Proud Boys, too, so the media was going after them. Seditious conspiracy was what he was convicted of. This means literally trying to attempt to overthrow the government. We know that nobody was attempting to overthrow the government. It's a ridiculous charge, and it's weaponized against anyone the left doesn't like. So this guy gets 17 years. The prosecution wanted 33 years from this guy. He didn't get convicted by a jury. He got convicted by the media. Watch this.
At this point, the Republican Party is like 60-40 between Proud Boys and the Klan, right? Who do you want as a neighbor? Neither one.
You believe that those are fair sentences?
I think they're fair.
I think the message is very clear. Don't get involved in a sedition.
These are the foot soldiers of MAGA Nation, and they're doing exactly what Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, and the MAGA Nation want them to do, which is to carry out violence in their name.
It's important that these people be taught a lesson and everyone be taught a lesson about the strength of the law.
If that's not a promo as why you should be watching Real America's Voice and not those loser networks, I don't know what is. Nobody wants violence. President Trump doesn't want violence. I don't want violence. No other conservative commentators I know want violence. This is an assault on the Constitution when a guy like this gets 17 years and you look at what's going on around the country with the horrible crime. He has 2 Purple Hearts to his name. Does that not mean anything when you're offering up a sentence for somebody? Which brings me now to another guy who doesn't deserve his sentence. You know our friend, John Strand. He's a good friend of this program. He's become a very, very good friend of mine. John Strand was just doing his job on January 6th, okay? Doing his job. He was a bodyguard. He made it his way into the Capitol, basically being pushed in there. There's no signs of violence, no signs of anything, being directed around by police, ultimately helping his client exit the Capitol, and he gets 32 months. Well, few weeks after checking himself into prison and like a level 1 facility in Miami, a bad place, he called us during this program. You may have heard some of it. Well, he got in trouble for this phone call. He's being punished for this phone call to us. Watch.
I have learned since I got here that, the January 6th story was, of course, well known to everyone, both staff and inmates. And I've learned that my coming was known, and so people have understood why I'm here. And I found this response to be overwhelmingly positive across the board. I've had actually no negative interactions. I've had some people pull me aside and say, hey, I think you're a hero and what you did is heroic, and I'm proud of the efforts that you're making in support of, the America First agenda.
Overwhelmingly positive isn't overwhelmingly positive now. The man is being punished, from what we're told, those close to him, for that phone call to us. And I hope this segment doesn't get him in more trouble. But I want the American people, and John wants the American people, to know what's going on because of all of this. Well, I told you he was the bodyguard for his client, who also was convicted in this. She took a plea deal. You know who that is? She was Simone Gold, Dr. Simone Gold of America's Frontline Doctors. She's also the president and founder of Gold Care, and she joins us now. Dr. Gold, it is good to see you.
Great to be here. Nice to see you, Grant.
Dr. Gold, John's friends, you let us know that phone call he made to us live on air from prison, he's getting backlash for that. Can you tell me what's going on inside there now?
Even for me, it's difficult to know. Communication is very limited. Thus far, he hasn't had any visitors. It takes a while for the Bureau of Prison to kind of move quickly. And so there's email and there's phone call, but his message to people was that appearing on your show really was not something that he was permitted to do. I don't fully understand this because in the Bureau of Prison.gov documents on their own website, an inmate has a right to speak to the media. So I don't understand this, and I don't know enough details myself to know what happened, but I know that he is no longer allowed to use the phone.
So clearly, when you're on the inside and having that connection to the people you love, your friends and family, helps you survive this. I believe this is a complete outrage. You took a plea deal, Dr. Gold, and you got how many months? And it's a shame that you even got 1 day, but you got how many months for the exact same crime that he got 32 months for?
Right. I mean, that's an example. I'm a lawyer as well, and it's just an example of the government punishing somebody for their right to go to trial, which is something the government is not allowed to punish you for. You have an absolute right to go to trial if you want to. So we can compare apples to apples, the exact same crime, the exact same charges, the exact same fact pattern. And I was given 60 days, which, by the way, is outrageous. This is a misdemeanor trespass. They offered that same misdemeanor trespass to John, but he really felt that he couldn't stand up and in his mind lie to the court, and commit, really a lie. So he chose to go to trial, which is his right. And because of that, he was punished with 32 months. The judge also said from the bench that it was also because John does so much public speaking on the subject. I don't really speak about it very much. But I'm here speaking really on behalf of a prisoner who is now, at least for the time being, really been silenced. So, I'm sorry to hear about, yeah.
When you go into prison, obviously you lose some rights when you go into prison, but your First Amendment rights isn't really one of them. I mean, not even for the worst criminals in the world. And as you said, this guy shouldn't even be serving 1 day in prison. Let me play a clip from that phone call, too. I don't know what got them so upset. He was pretty upbeat about things. This is play cut 3.
I was not innocent until proven guilty. I was guilty until proven convicted. I knew that 2 years ago, Grant, so I've been preparing for this for 2 years. But as much as you can prepare for a plunge in the Arctic, you still get your breath knocked out of you when you jump in. And the first couple of weeks in here were really difficult, both physically and mentally. But God is faithful, and He's just blessed me richly with peace and strength and some really kind, decent people around me. And so I'm doing well, and I'm keeping my spirits high, and really excited for the opportunities God will give me here to continue working and continue advocating for truth and for President Trump.
Dr. Gold, I got to tell you from a personal level, I've gotten to know John, and I've gotten to know you. I feel horrible that he was punished for coming on this show. I did not think that would happen in any way, shape, or form. I thought you can make a phone call, you can talk to the media. I feel absolutely awful about this. You can see the positive spirit even in an awful place. I think they're trying to break him, Dr. Gold.
Listen, I want to tell you what's going on. What's going on is the individual versus the collective. They're angry that he didn't take a knee. They're angry that he didn't ask for permission. I had no idea this was going to happen. You didn't know this was going to happen. He has a right, according to the BOP, to talk to the media. So I don't think he had any idea that there was some kind of rule breaking from their perspective. I don't know. I don't know. I myself have limited information, but it's very clear that this is the individual versus the collective. So the collective in this case is the BOP or the DOJ. The individual people like John Strand or the Proud Boys, et cetera. So if you think this isn't coming to you folks, you need to wake up, because I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, and I spent 60 days in federal penitentiary, and John was my bodyguard, and he's now sentenced to 32 years. This is coming to everybody if we don't win this fight.
Yeah. 32 months, not 32. Thank God, not 32 years, but 32 months.
Sorry. Thank you.
It's awful. Yeah, of course. It's awful. And I just wish there was something we could do for him. So I'm worried. The Biden administration, clearly, as John said, you're guilty. You're guilty before any trial, anything to do with January 6th. We know that. You would think the prison guards would be on his side, knowing that I would assume most of them must be conservative.
I think the guards, I think this is happening above that level. I don't think it's necessarily the guards or the inmates. There's somebody above this that's pulling the strings on this. And we need to win this fight. This is the collectivist mentality, tyrannical. They're saying you can just throw people away because they have this goal of stopping Trump or stopping MAGA. No matter what your political beliefs are, these are individuals whose lives are being ruined. And if you believe in an individual's, made in God's image and inalienable rights, you have to be against this sort of tyranny. It's the tyranny of the individual.
You would hope so. I'm going to contact members of Congress that I know that are favorable to January 6ers. Honestly, I don't even know if they can have anything to do, but it's worth a try. And so I'm most certainly going to do that. And Dr. Simone Gold, I always appreciate when you come on. Hey, you got this new Gold Care out. Real quick, I want to give you a plug because you've been persecuted. Anything we can do to help you, Stinchfield's Army out there, let me know. What's this Gold Care all about?
Listen, thank you so much. So goldcare.com, please come check it out. Everyone who's hearing my voice, the solution for the medical tyranny is in your pocket. Goldcare.com, we're a doctor you can trust in your pocket. A doctor in your pocket, goldcare.com.
A doc in the pocket. I love it. Dr. Gold, thank you so much. Always good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right. Folks, this is the kind of thing that makes you really, really angry as to where our country has gone. When you think they punish a man for literally using his voice, speaking his mind. But that's what you get from Democrats. Why would we really be surprised? All right, what would happen if our electric grid went down? It could easily happen. Wait till you hear. One Biden administration official was asked about it. Her response is literally sent me over the edge. In fact, it inspired this next segment. It's next. Welcome back, everyone. There have been numerous reports from the intelligence community, and in fact, one I read from the Director of National Intelligence, that says our electricity grid throughout this country is at complete risk. It is vulnerable to attack. One of the reasons is every one of the grids is really connected to the internet. A cyber attack on our grid is a real possibility, not to mention a physical attack as well. Then I saw a report by the General Accountability Office, the GAO, that said the Department of Energy, who oversees much of our grid system, does not have a, quote, national strategy when it comes to protecting or fixing the vulnerabilities. Now, we know that Russia and China continue to wage cyber attacks on our grid on nearly a daily basis. Some of them have gotten so bad, if they weren't stopped, it could have brought the United States to our knees. This is from a past 60 Minutes report, but I'll play you just to see how serious this is.
If they had succeeded, what would have happened?
Could have brought down all Silicon Valley.
We're talking Google, Apple, all these guys.
Yes, that's correct.
Who do you think this could have been?
I don't know. We don't know if they were a nation state. We don't know if they were domestic actors, but it was somebody who did have competent people who could, in fact, plan out this kind of very sophisticated attack and execute it.
Here's the reality, though. You don't even need to be sophisticated. You don't need to be competent. You can literally take firearms and bring down transformers, knock power out to 40,000 people. That's what happened in Moore County. In, what was that, North Carolina or South Carolina, I believe, 40,000 people out of power. This is Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin, who seems to be the only guy in Washington asking questions about serious issues. Watch this.
Infrastructure package, I'm not hearing anybody talk about purchasing in advance these large power transformers that could be wiped out in an EMP, GMD, or a cyber attack. And they're irreplaceable, basically, in a short period of time. We're just not thinking through how incredibly vulnerable we are. We're shutting down nuclear energy plants.
So this week, a Department of Homeland Security advisor was asked a question by the media about our electricity grid. And the question is such an important question. This is a high-ranking official inside the Biden administration talking about our electricity grid. Wait till you hear her answer.
Can you say how much of the grid is in danger or is at risk or antiquated?
I think we should go on to others. Thanks.
I think we should go into other things. What do you mean I think we should go into other things? No, we want to know how much is antiquated. That answer alone tells me it's very antiquated and nobody's doing anything about it. Well, joining me now is someone who is trying to do something about it, trying to raise the alarm bells, even pushing through legislation in many states, including my home state of Texas, to try to get these electricity grids up to speed and protected. He is the director and producer of the documentary Grid Down, Power Up. David Tice is back with us. David, welcome to the program.
Glad to be with you and your viewers, Grant.
All right, thank you, David. What do you make of that Biden official? I think we should move on to something else.
Isn't that unbelievable? But that's typical. I mean, it's there is a complacency in our administration. Jennifer Granholm, though the Secretary of Energy under Joe Biden, was asked directly on a Sunday morning talk show once if our adversaries were in the grid and if they could shut it down, and she did respond affirmatively.
She responded affirmatively. So we do know that there are Chinese chips going into our electricity grid. We know President Trump shut that down with an executive order. Joe Biden throws out that executive order. He reverses it, boggling the mind. David, in your opinion, you've got Grid Down, Power Up. I'll play a clip of it in a moment. But how vulnerable are we?
We are extraordinarily vulnerable, Grant. And you think about 55,000 substations, and you mentioned just rifle fire. And the fact that we don't have screens obstructing, viewing of where the transformers are. We know from John Wellinghoff, who was on your clip earlier, who was a prior chairman of FERC, said that as few as 9 critical nodes of substations, if they were taken out, could knock out the grid coast to coast.
Coast to coast. Can you imagine if the power went out coast to coast? You think the criminal and looting is bad in Los Angeles right now when the power is basically barely staying on in California? I couldn't imagine the chaos that would ensue. Let me play a clip from your documentary because it's eye-opening.
The electricity grid goes down. You're back in the 1880s pre-electricity.
If 1,000 transformers are knocked out, we'll end up with massive social disruption. Virtually every study you'll see has an anarchistic component that leads to rioting. It is almost inevitable.
Imagine what will happen if there is no food, no power, and no money, and no transportation. Only people with guns and the boldness to go and take what they need to survive.
All right, David, pretty cool. You got Dennis Quaid to narrate it. He's been instrumental going around to some of the state legislatures to try to raise awareness to this around the country. What do you think is the biggest threat? You know, I've heard electromagnetic pulse, so we could set something like that off and it would shut the electricity down. Is there one big risk, or are we just screwed?
Well, I would say the cyber attack risk is probably the greatest. We have 300 Chinese transformers in our system. We have 50 Chinese transformers that are within 50 miles of military bases. I think that is the biggest risk. In terms of a risk that we know is coming, we're not sure when. It's a geomagnetic disturbance. There's some naive people that might think the bad guys aren't going to be that bad, or we will have mutually assured destruction, and therefore we will not have these three adversarial threats come at us. But even if you believe that, then we know the sun will eventually cause a massive geomagnetic disturbance that could wipe out our grid. And in fact, NASA has said that there's a 12% probability every decade that a massive storm like that will occur.
All right, so that's not even from nefarious actors. That's just from the sun. Is there or are there materials, technology that can be instituted to protect the grid from something like that?
Yes, there is technology out there for GMD. There's something called zero ground blockers. There is technology available that could be added on the front end. There's been cost estimates saying less than $10 million could protect the entire nation. As far as EMP or
Wait a second, David. $10 million could protect the entire nation? That's a drop in the bucket. We spent over $100 billion to Ukraine.
$10 billion.
$10 billion.
Yes.
Okay. Even so, $10 billion. It's amazing that I have to say $10 billion is also a drop in the bucket when we spent $100 billion in Ukraine. But real quick, we could protect the entire grid for $10 billion. Why are we not acting?
This should have been done yesterday. In fact, Barack Obama was concerned about solar weather and solar storms. And unfortunately, it ended up going to the regulators. It ended up going to FERC and NERC, and they essentially dropped the ball. That's why we believe there is a regulatory capture problem in place here. And our regulators are not doing what needs to be done. There needs to be repeal of the Federal Power Act to essentially get NERC, out of this business of regulating the utilities, because it's essentially self-regulated.
I'm sure they're basically in the pocket of all the energy companies, and the energy companies don't want to spend the money to do this, so they lobby, and lo and behold, who's at risk? The American people, as we always are the ones on the short end of the stick. David Tice, I appreciate you coming on. Grid Down, Power Up is the documentary. You just put it into Google. You find it real quick. David, great to have you on.
Thank you, Grant.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Did you get the feeling that something bad is going to happen soon just after that segment? You better believe it might, okay? But between the distractions and the smoke screens and the media, we probably won't see it coming. That's why it's smart to invest in emergency food right away. As they say, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. My Patriot Supply is the nation's leader in high-quality emergency food. So head to our website, preparewithrav.com, and you'll save $200 on a 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. Enjoy a wide variety of delicious meals, offering over 2,000 calories a day for optimum strength under stress. Stock up before panic sets in. Free shipping is automatic, and your order ships very fast. Again, preparewithrav.com. preparewithrav.com. If that segment didn't tell you to go to preparewithrav.com, I don't know what did, and it was literally a coincidence that we got that advertisement after there. All right, folks, we will break down the body language of Gold Star families giving their message to Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell's recent health scares. That's next.
Yeah, so here he starts to lose this, and I've read from neurologists they think it's actually seizures, not necessarily dementia, because he had a fall back in March and had a concussion. And there's a thing to pay attention to. If it's a seizure, there are dogs who are trained to alert on seizures, and so there are discernible patterns leading to a seizure. Caretakers are often taught what to look for and how to find that. Even in dementia, you can find patterns. I just have not seen enough of them to know exactly where that's coming from. The only question I'd ask you, would you get in the car with this guy?
No. So if you wouldn't get in the car with him, do you really want him running the United States Senate? That's the other question. I don't say this as a Republican or Democrat. Look, he's a Republican. I disagree with him a lot. But, I just want everybody safe. I pray for the guy. I was interested, though, his caregiver, you mentioned her. Did you read any body language in her? At one point, I thought she almost winked at the media like she knew, like we knew this happens. If you watch here.
Look, I think she's there to make this happen. And these people are taught certain words, usually when somebody's having a seizure or if somebody has dementia, people are typically taught certain words that are less threatening, less alarming, and that kind of thing. The one thing I would point out is I talked to somebody and said, now his other handler is clearly making arrangements with the mic and getting everything together. You can't miss that body language, and he's talking to him, telling him he's bringing something around. One of the people I talked to pointed out, well, he doesn't make all his own decisions. If that's true, Trump's right.
Yeah,
you can't argue with Trump about deep state when you say that.
No, you can't. And somebody else making decisions for you. You're the leader of the United States Senate. All right, let's roll the old clip when this first happened to him, which, again, I felt horrible for the guy when something like this happens. I don't want to see it happen to anyone. Let's roll that one.
In cooperation and a string of
So Greg, this one goes on for a while.
Yeah, so interestingly, in children, you see absence seizures where they develop a whole pattern of those, and they're discernible when they're coming. This is what it looks like. Of course, I'm not a neurologist. Neurologists would say they don't onset later, but he's clearly not in touch with what's going on around him. His eyes have the 1,000-yard stare. He's not engaged, and you can hear him trailing off as he comes up to it. We all have done that in a confusing moment, but this is a really confusing one when it stays gone for that long.
Yeah, it really is. I think, honestly, from my opinion, for the good of the nation, we talked about it. He needs to step down, but he certainly has my prayers for all of this. Look, the Senate right now, you've got Dianne Feinstein, who's totally out of it for everybody at home. You've got Fetterman, who's totally out of it. I mean, we're running a government, the most powerful government in the nation. You can't have it be a nursing home, as Nikki Haley said. All right, let me play a clip for you of one of the Gold Star families, because, boy, these people are mad, and rightly so. This is a father of Jared Schmitz, I believe, is his son, who died in Afghanistan, that debacle, pullout. Let me run this clip for you.
Well, I stood there on the tarmac watching you check your watch over and over again. All I wanted to do was shout out, it's 2:30. But out of respect to the other grieving families, I bit my tongue once again. Well, I stood there on the tarmac.
Anger. You can't miss it. That is real anger. You can't miss it. Look at the narrowing of the eyes, the exposing of the lower teeth. There's a whole lot with all these guys, but his eyes narrow, his brow goes down, his voice changes. He makes hard eye contact saying what he has to say. And these guys have prepared statements so that they don't get emotional. It's hard not to in this situation.
I don't know why we're going to Mitch McConnell. We can cut away from that. Why, guys? Why he held his hand up and he shook it like that? Did you see that moment?
Well, that's emphatic, illustrating when a person's doing that, they're doing what their brain is thinking and they're punctuating their thoughts. His hand when he's doing this, though, is about his watch, because if you remember, Biden's standing on the tarmac looking at his watch when these heroes are coming back into America.
All right, so let me play another one for you. Also, Gold Star families, cut 3.
I'd trade every medal, every award to have my son back. But he would go again if he knew, even now, the danger. Because that's what a good soldier does. They face death, and they're willing to do that for our country.
And Greg, a lot of people at home don't know. You were a military interrogator. You served, and we thank you for that. Boy, if her words weren't touching, I don't know what else is.
Well, I always say there's no greater sacrifice anybody can do than to send their children off to war. And when you lose a child, it's one of the toughest things on earth. So you can see the grief in this woman's face. It's very clear. Grief and anger. You see that horseshoe-shaped thing in her brow. That's considered the grief muscle. And it's a cluster of muscles showing true grief. She also has elevated stress as she starts to blink, and the sides of her mouth are drawn down, and this thing we call the chin boss is thrust forward. All those are the greatest signs of grief you're going to find. And those exposed lower teeth show anger. All appropriate for.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? All right. I want to bring one, I'll call it an upbeat one because I love to make fun of her. This is Karine Jean-Pierre making a totally outrageous statement, and I want to get your response to what this is like. It's real quick on the backside of this soundbite from Karine Jean-Pierre talking about the border.
The president has done more to secure the border and to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. He really has.
What does my body language say? I mean, what?
Grant, if you catch a fish and you tell me the fish was this big, but your hands are out of frame, I'm immediately going to peg my meter that something's wrong. And she even closes her eyes. She does a downright eye accessing, and she just gets better. Her shoulders start dancing around. There's so much going on in these clips. It's just insane. She doesn't believe this. She can't.
She doesn't believe. That's my question. I know we always say, well, you can't tell if someone's lying or not, but sincerity here is on the low meter.
Oh, yeah. Well, and one thing to tell you, go and watch her during this press conference. One of her shoulders gets to where she's going to fly away. And that single shoulder shrug is an indicator you don't believe what you're saying and you're not comfortable with the facts you're stating.
Wow. Greg, it's always great having you on the program. And again, thank you for your service. We do appreciate that. And also, I tell people, go to readbodylanguage.com. Check out his YouTube show, The Behavior Panel. It's great. I mean it. And it's always great having Greg on. All right, folks, listen to me. Protect yourself with gold today by texting America to the number 989898. I mean it. We've been talking a lot about chaos in the world today. Could you imagine if the electricity grid did go down like in our last segment and the bank system fails? You better have some gold on hand. That commodity has stood the test of time when it comes to dealing with chaos. So again, I urge you, call my friends at Birch Gold. Birch Gold is the nation's leader in all of this stuff. Text America to the number 989898. Do it today, and they can even take some of your IRA, turn it into a precious metals IRA. There's all kinds of options on how to do this. Birch Gold can help you. Again, America to the number 989898. Give my friends at Birch Gold a call. All right, Nancy Pelosi insults, Trump voters again. We'll play that for you next.
Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Congress is scheduled to return after Labor Day, and it's gearing up for a new fight over funding. Some conservatives, led by Marjorie Taylor Greene, said they won't fund the government unless the impeachment of President Biden is on the table. The White House, meanwhile, is seeking a short-term funding deal. January 6 cases are still filling the nation's courthouses. In the latest case, a top Proud Boys leader was sentenced to jail for a near-record 17 years. Despite all of Biden's bailout plans, deadbeat students will have to begin paying back their student loans in a month, just like the rest of us do with our loans. And on a weekend where there are typically many gun shows around the nation, the president announced plans to crack down on resellers and impose fines up to $250,000. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Welcome back, everyone. So what are we called as Trump supporters? Deplorables, that's from Hillary Clinton, listless vessels from DeSantis, and now here's Nancy Pelosi.
It's interesting to see how there's a certain element of the population who will just go for him. They're people we would probably never get. They don't share our values in terms of respect for the dignity and worth of every person and the rest.
No, it's the opposite. You don't care about the dignity or worth of people. We do. We want opportunity for everybody. In fact, we love America. And no, we don't share your values. We're not for communism. We're not for socialism. We're not for a dictatorship, Nancy Pelosi. We share American values: freedom, liberty, pushing back against tyranny, and a love of community. It's going to do it for us. Happy Labor Day, everybody. Stinchfield's Army rolls. See you here Tuesday.
Oh, that's just a little preview of what's coming on a Friday night. That's right.